Tech Talks Education. Let us continue with ions, and in this case we are going to look at the formation of ions. I want us to know generally something about formation of ions. One, I want us to know the following points. One, in a neutral atom, of an element, the number of protons and neutrons are equal. This is what we saw before, that protons are positive particles. Let me put it here. Protons are positive particles, and then not neutrons but electrons. Electrons are, number of protons and electrons are equal. So in a neutral atom of an element, the number of protons which are positive particles and electrons which are negative particles are equal or the same. So if protons and electrons are equal in number, it means that the number of positive charges and then the negative charges simply cancel, and we strike neutrality in an atom of an element. So in an atom of an element, the number of protons and electrons are equal, and that one makes an atom to be just neutral. That is one of the things that we must not forget. Now, we have seen that ions are atoms which are not neutral. They are either positively charged or negatively charged. Now, let us try to see what causes this. If in an atom of an element, the number of protons is equal to the number of electrons, it means that in an ion, the number of protons and electrons are not equal. And what causes this? Why is it that in ions or charged atoms, the number of protons and electrons are not equal? Let us firstly say that in an ion, which is a charged atom, the number of protons, and electrons are not equal. We must not forget this, that in an ion, that is in a charged atom, the number of protons and electrons are not equal. Remember, we are trying to see how these charged atoms called ions are formed. So we say that if at all an atom is neutral and it is not an ion, it will be having the same number of protons and electrons. But in this case, if an atom is charged, either positively charged, that is if it is a cation, or negatively charged, or it is an anion, in this case the number of the protons and electrons are not equal. That is in an ion. Now let us see what causes this. Ions, or the charged atoms, are formed as a result of either the loss or gain of electrons, the loss or gain of electrons in the outermost shell of an atom. So, we have just seen that in a neutral atom, protons and electrons are equal in number. and this one causes an atom to be neutral due to the same number of positive particles or positive charges, that is the protons, and then the negative charges, that is electrons. So if they are the same in number, then we expect the positive charges to cancel the negative charges, and then we remain with a neutral atom. Not that there are no positive or negative charges. In this case, they are there, but the numbers are equal. So an atom therefore is neutral. It is not an ion. But in the event that the number of protons and electrons are not equal, then that atom cannot be neutral. If protons and electrons are not equal in number, then the atom cannot be neutral. If protons, the number is not equal to the number of electrons, then the atom cannot be neutral. Reason being, either the number of protons is more than the number of electrons, or the number of electrons is more than the number of protons. So you find that either the positive charges or the protons tend to outweigh the negative charges or the electrons, or vice versa, whereby the electrons may be more than the protons. So the negative charges outweighing the positive charges. And we say that what causes this is, that is now in the formation of a given ion. It is just the result of either the loss or the gain of electrons in the outermost shell of an atom. So if electrons are either lost or gained by an atom of an element, then in this case the number of protons can be more than the number of electrons, or the number of protons can be less than the number of electrons. Let us see what causes the first one here. In the first instance here, why protons are more than electrons is because if initially protons and electrons are equal in number, but if electrons are more than protons, it means that electrons are what? Gained. So this one is as a result of the gain of electrons. Now, where we have protons being less than, or if protons are more than electrons, it means that here there has been the loss of electrons. So if electrons are lost, so the electrons becomes less than the protons. Protons becomes more than electrons. But where we have protons being less in number than the electrons, it means that here there has been the gain of electrons. There has been the gain of electrons. So if electrons are gained, it means that the number of electrons will be more than the number of protons. And this one here, the end result is that the number of protons will not be the same as the number of electrons. So an atom of an element, therefore, this one implies that an atom of an element becomes what? Charged. So the atom becomes charged. The atom becomes charged. Either positively charged or negatively charged. Now let us see the end result of the loss of electrons, whereby protons are more than electrons. So if we have more protons than electrons, it means that the number of protons or positive particles will be more than the number of the negative particles or the electrons. So the atom will be having extra or excess protons or excess or extra positive charges, and the atom will be positively charged. So this atom will be positively charged. But where we have the protons being less than electrons, that means if electrons were gained such that the number of electrons becomes more than the number of protons, in this case it means that the number of electrons becomes more than the number of protons, and then there will be extra or excess electrons or negative charges. So this atom will not be neutral but becomes what? Negatively charged. So we get a negatively charged atom, what we call an anion, and this is what we call a cation. So in a cation, we have the loss of electrons, which makes the number of protons to become more than the number of electrons. Electrons will be less than protons because some electrons were lost. So the atom will have excess or extra electrons. So it will not be neutral but positively charged, since the excess protons are positive particles. Then, where we have got an anion, that is a negatively charged ion, that one is as a result of the gain of electrons by an atom of an element. So if an atom gains some electrons, it means that the number of electrons will be more than the number of protons, or the number of protons will be less than the number of electrons in this case. So if the protons are less than electrons, it means that the number of electrons will be more than the number of protons, and we shall have extra or excess electrons, and that atom becomes what? Negatively charged, and that's what we call an anion. So we must know that in an ion, the number of protons and electrons are not the same. They are not like in a neutral atom where protons and electrons are the same in number. But in this case, in an anion where protons and electrons are not the same, then we shall have that atom being called an ion. And then we can have either electron loss or electron gain, which lead to the formation of either a positively charged ion, that is by the loss of electrons, or the formation of a negatively charged ion, that is by the gain of electrons. So in any ion, protons and electrons are not the same in number. So be very careful here. You must know that if you have been given, say, like some data where we have the number of protons, neutrons and electrons, take note that a cation will be having more protons than electrons, because cations are formed as a result of the loss of electrons. And where we have the number of protons being less than the number of electrons, it means that there was electron gain, and that one is what we call an anion. So that atom will be negatively charged because electrons will be in excess as compared to the protons. So that is how ions are formed. In our next session, we shall go specifically to look at how a cation is formed and how an anion is formed, and we shall look at the first 20 elements in particular. So this is Step Talks Education. Thank you for watching.